Stand a wall, sit and a wall bridge next to each other, and they look like distant cousins. One faces out, one faces in. Both use nothing but a wall and your own weight. But there's a real physics difference between them. A difference in exactly which joint is doing the holding and which muscle is footing the bill. That difference decides which one actually rebuilds your legs and hips after 60. Almost nobody explains it before you're already holding the position. Wondering why one feels so different from the other? Find a clear stretch of wall. Slide your back down it until your knees bend to roughly a right angle. Thighs level with the floor. All feet planted about 2 feet out in front of you. Shoulder width apart. Hold there. Within about 10 seconds, you'll feel it. A deep, steady burn across the front of your thighs, the big muscle group running from your hip down to just below your kneecap. That's the quadriceps. Its one job, right now, is holding your knee joint locked at a fixed angle. No swinging, no momentum, just sustained, unbroken effort. Keep that burn in mind. It's about to explain something that will change how you think about getting out of a chair. One quick adjustment. While you're still there, the deeper that knee bend goes, the more compressive force runs straight through the kneecap and the cartilage behind it. Got existing knee arthritis or cartilage wear? You don't need a full right angle. A shallower squat, well, short of 90 degrees, still builds real endurance, with far less load grinding through the joint itself. Comment your age, where you're watching from, and what that thigh burn felt like. Why does one static hold matter so much for something as ordinary as standing up? Researchers put 2 groups through a simple, brutal test. Young adults in their 20s, older adults between 60 and 75. Stand up. Sit back down. Over and over. Until the legs simply won't do it again. Sensors on the skin tracked exactly how much of each muscle's true maximum strength was being spent on every repetition. One number predicted how long a person could keep going better than anything else, measured how much of the quadriceps' full capacity that motion was demanding. Push a muscle close to its ceiling early, and there's almost no reserve left for rep after rep. The older adults were already starting closer to their ceiling than the 20-year-olds on the very first repetition. Feel that thigh burn build again, right now, at your own wall. That's the same ceiling being tested, just in a hold, instead of a movement. Here's a simple way to track it over time. Time your hold. Once a week, same wall, same shoes or bare feet. Write the number down. That single number, not a fitness score, not a percentile, is a rough, honest snapshot of how much reserve your quadriceps are carrying for real tasks. Week over week, that endurance ceiling isn't fixed forever, either. In a shorter trial, 6 to 9 weeks, a group of adults in their 70s trained their knee-straightening muscles with a mix of voluntary effort and light electrical stimulation. Peak strength climbed by roughly 30%. Real number. Short window. Worth naming as exactly that. A fast, early gain from a brief study. Not proof of what holds up over years. Their distance on a timed 6-minute walking test improved too, by more than 50 meters. Past the 20 to 30 meter mark, researchers treat as a genuinely noticeable change in daily life. The kind you'd feel the next time you're crossing a parking lot before the light changes. Now, peel off the wall. Try the second position. Lie on your back. Knees bent, feet flat on the floor. Lift your hips until your body forms a straight line from knee to shoulder. Most people's first instinct is to keep the legs almost straight, heels far from the hips. Try it that way for a moment. You'll feel the strain land mostly in the back of the thigh, the hamstring, and it tightens fast, sometimes even threatening to seize. Now bring your heels in close to your hips instead. Knees bent hard. Lift again, pushing the weight down through your heels. Notice the difference immediately. The effort shifts backward, into the muscle mass of your buttock, the gluteus maximus, sitting just beneath the base of your spine. That shift isn't a feeling you're imagining. A study measured exactly how much of the buttock muscle and how much of the hamstring switched on across two versions of this same hip lift. In the bent knee version, the ratio flipped decisively toward the buttock. Put real numbers on it. Peak buttock effort sat around 34% of its own maximum in both versions. That muscle worked about the same either way. What moved was the hamstring. Straighter leg roughly 51% of its own maximum. Bent knee around 28%. Sama lift, same body weight. Nearly half the hamstring effort because the buttock picked up the slack instead. In plain terms, bend the knee hard enough and you turn a hamstring dominant lift into a genuine hip strengthening one. Worth saying plainly that research was done on a general adult sample, not a group, specifically over 60, but the mechanism it's showing, which muscle takes the load at which knee angle, doesn't change with age. What changes is how much margin you've got if you get that angle wrong. Hold on to that thought. It's exactly the drawback we're coming back to in a minute. So here's where these two actually go their separate ways. The wall sit is almost purely a quadriceps endurance test. One muscle group, one job, held dead still. The wall bridge is a hip extension move that can swing either direction, hamstring heavy or glute heavy, depending entirely on how sharply you bend that knee. Same wall, same body weight. Two completely different muscles doing the actual work. One woman in her late 70s joined a community program offering supervised strength and balance sessions once a week. She kept at it for over 2 years. By the end, her ability to rise from a chair repeatedly had improved by several seconds, a real, measured change. Not a guess. Her knee straightening strength had climbed too. Her walking speed picked up a touch alongside it. And her balance, measured on a standard clinical scale used to flag fall risk, held roughly steady across the 2 years. Rather than slipping the way it often does when nothing is done at all. Here's the honest part of that same study, though. The men in the program, tracked over that identical 2-year stretch, showed no measurable gain in strength or walking speed. Same program. Same 2 years. Different outcome. That's not a strike against the exercise. It's a reminder that someone else's result is never a promise of your own. What's on offer here is understanding, not a guarantee. Now for the part most videos skip. Isometric holds any position where a muscle works hard without moving, like the wall sit. Don't just tire the legs. They spike blood pressure, sometimes sharply, while you're holding them. In one recent study, healthy adults holding a wall sit had their blood pressure climb fast enough that nearly all of them crossed a predefined safety threshold within under a minute. Women crossed it faster than men. On average, the wall sit also produced a sharper rise in systolic pressure, the top number in a reading, than a plank held for a comparable effort. In the same research, current heart health guidelines already treat isometric holds like this as something to introduce carefully in anyone with existing blood pressure or heart concerns. Findings like this one are exactly why. Nobody in that study was harmed. But if you have diagnosed high blood pressure, heart disease, or you've never had either checked, that's a conversation for your doctor before you turn a 15-second hold into a personal challenge. The wall bridge carries some of that same sustained effort load, just distributed differently. Usually, for less total time under tension. Same basic caution about breath holding and straining applies to both. The wall bridge has its own separate failure pattern. It shows up constantly in real accounts from people who tried it without knowing the fix. Here's a fairly common version of it. Someone starts bridges as part of a rehab plan for hip discomfort. The pain doesn't ease some days. It's worse. They stop entirely. It decide the exercise just isn't right for their body. Then they start testing variations on their own, a shallower range, a sharper knee bend, holding briefly, and checking in with the hip rather than pushing straight through the discomfort. Within a session or two of that trial and error, the ache eases. The same movement that once aggravated the joint starts strengthening it instead. Nothing mysterious happened there. The muscle doing the lifting simply changed from a joint-absorbing strain to a muscle actually built to handle the load. Sharpen the knee bend. Shift the load toward the buttock, and that same cramping frequently disappears too. A second pattern shows up just as often. People push the hips too high at the top of the bridge, arching the lower back past a straight line, instead of stopping level with the knees and shoulders. That extra range doesn't add strength. It adds compressive stress right at the base of the spine, specifically at the small joints on the back of each vertebra, built to guide gentle rotation, not to absorb repeated loading in an arched position. It's a common, quietly building cause of lower back soreness that shows up hours later, not during the set itself, which is exactly why it gets blamed on something else entirely. Going further sounds like it should always mean working harder. It doesn't. Here. Well, once your hips reach a straight line from knee to shoulder, the hip extension motion is complete. Squeezing the buttock at that point adds real muscular effort. Arching beyond it adds joint stress without adding strength. More range isn't automatically more benefit. In this specific motion, the ceiling is neutral, not extension. So where does that leave the actual comparison? The wall sit is the more targeted test of pure quadriceps endurance. One muscle, one steady demand, and a real, measurable link to how long your legs can keep answering a repeated task like standing up from a chair. It also carries the faster blood pressure response of the two, which matters most if your cardiovascular health is already a question mark. The wall bridge is the more adjustable of the two. Same wall, same body weight, but a knee angle you control. That decides whether your hamstrings or your glutes absorb the work. It comes with a documented failure mode, overarching the back, that's easy to avoid once you know to stop at neutral. Neither one replaces the other. They're not training the same muscle group in the same way to begin with. Main worry is getting out of a chair without a struggle. The wall sit is the more direct test of exactly that capacity. Main worry is a stiff or aching hip. The bridge lets you dial the effort toward the muscle built to protect that joint, provided the knee bend is doing its job. Go back to that wall right now. If you still have it nearby, feel the front of thigh burn from the sit. Then the back of hip effort from the bridge, side by side. Notice how differently each one sits in your body, one steady and unmoving up front. One, anchored, and pressing down through the heels at the back. Two different muscles. Two different physics problems. One shared piece of equipment. Somewhere past hip extension mechanics. There's a related question. How the same wall-supported principle applies to balance and single leg control after 60. A genuinely different piece of physics. One for another day. If physics of your body helped you feel your own strength, like and subscribe to Historical Legends. This video is for general educational purposes about wall sits and wall bridges. It is not medical advice and does not diagnose or treat any condition. If you have an existing heart, blood pressure, joint, or spine condition, talk with your doctor before starting either exercise. Individual results and safe starting points will vary from person to person.